All right, everybody, we are back this week for UFC Vegas Magny versus Prates. I believe this is UFC Vegas 100, the historic 100th event from the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. And we have a battle between an up-and-coming welterweight assassin taking on one of the stablemates of the 170-pound division between Neil Magny and Carlos the Nightmare Prates. Magny is currently ranked 15th in the division, while Prates is trying to crack into the top 15 and then work his way up to eventual top 10 territory. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. All right, guys, let's recap last night's event and predictions. Pretty solid on the predictions. Called the Zalal sub. Called the Jazadovicius sub in round 2, round 3. Even parlayed plus 1,400 Zalal sub 2-3 plus 1,200 Jazadovicius sub 2-3. But guess what? Didn't put them together. So didn't make any money off those picks. But we made some profit. Had a parlay with Mike Malat, Yusuf Zalal, and Sirhi Saidi. Got a gift with the Saidi decision, but that's part of the reason I played it, because I knew we were in his hometown. So if worst comes to worst on a close fight, we might be able to eke out that split decision. I think Armfield won that, I'm going to be honest. But I could also see the guillotine attempts, the really close submission attempts, winning Saidi one of those. I believe it was the second round, winning him that second round. And then I think Saidi may have done enough to win the first round. But I believe Armfield probably should have won that, but we've had so many decisions that should have gone our way that ended up going in the opposite direction, and you know, we got one with this one, so can't say anything about that. I think Rose won round 1, round 2, and round 4. I think Blanchfield won 3 and 5. I don't think it's a robbery. I don't think she clearly won, because we knew that Blanchfield clearly won the 5th round. She clearly won the 3rd round with her wrestling and top pressure. But there wasn't really any takedowns in round 4, and the striking was pretty close. I thought Rose edged it out. But again, I don't think Blanchfield was a bad decision. Really solid grappling, really good cardio, and she is going to be a problem for a lot of girls in that division. I don't know where Rose goes from here, but I guess we'll find out with her next fight announcement. I'm actually pretty pissed, because I wanted to see Alexa Grasso and Nama Yunus. I think that's one of the best fights you can make at 125. And we're probably not going to get that now. So we'll see where Rose goes after this fight. Not a bad performance from Rose. Just couldn't get up off the ground when Blanchfield took her down. Heavy top pressure, heavy top control. It wasn't a lot of ground and pound coming from the side of Blanchfield either. It was kind of just holding and maintaining position. I'm surprised the ref didn't stand it up at certain points. But it is what it is. But we got to go on to next week. And we got to get into the predictions for this card. So, yeah, let's kick it off with Tresean Gore taking on Antonio Tricoli in the middleweight division. This is a pretty volatile one. I could see either of these guys winning. We know that Tresean Gore has heavy power, but he doesn't have the best cardio, and if you kind of push him and back him up and beat him up a little bit, he tends to break. He's a very good hammer. He's not the greatest nail. Tricoli's kind of a similar situation where I think Tricoli has the more technical striking. I think he probably has the better jiu-jitsu when the fight hits the mat. But Gore is so good at just finding ways to win or just landing a big shot. I kind of think this fight's 50-50. Like, if you really look at it and break it down, I think it's kind of a coin flip. Gore has decent power, but I think he probably gets out-volumed by Tricoli. And I think Tricoli has decent enough striking to compete with Gore, but probably not the same power. But he also has better jiu-jitsu, in my opinion. But Gore can always, catch you on a bad takedown attempt, catch your neck in on a shot, and lock it up with a ninja choke or maybe a guillotine choke like we saw against Josh Fremd. So Gore wins fights that he probably shouldn't win just based off of his pure power and tenacity and just finding ways to win. Tricoli, I think, is going to be better at range. He's going to throw better shots. He's going to have a 5-inch reach advantage. He probably can catch Gore coming in. Gore doesn't have the best chin. I'm going to take Antonio Tricoli here. I don't love the pick because, again, I could see Gore just finding a way to win, pulling a win out of his ass, and, getting a guillotine or landing a big shot on Tricoli's chin and knocking him out. But I think Tricoli is more than likely the more well-rounded mixed martial artist, and I think he will find a way to crack the chin of Tresean Gore, and I could see him just outpointing him over 15 minutes and outworking him in the later rounds, winning a decision. So I'm going to go Antonio Tricoli to win. I'm going to go third round TKO. I think he's going to catch Gore's chin and knock him out. I think his defense isn't the best, but it's probably good enough to get past this fight. So give me Antonio Tricoli. I'm going to go third round TKO over Tresean Gore. Again, kind of a coin flip. I could see Gore finding a way to win. I could see him grabbing a neck. I could see him landing a big shot and getting the KO. But I'm going to go with Tricoli here. I liked what I saw in certain aspects against Shara. You know, he did land some good shots. He did push him back. He did go for takedowns. And I think he can kind of implement a similar thing here against Gore, who doesn't have the best chin. So yeah, give me Tricoli third round TKO. Up next is a fight in the bantamweight division between a Contender Series alum in Cortavius Romeus taking on the Dream Killer. I believe that's his nickname. I might be wrong. In Gaston Bolaños. I think this fight, again, it's basically striker versus grappler. Cortavius has the much better jiu-jitsu. He has the much better wrestling. He can go for arm bars, triangles, try to get sweeps off of his back. And on the ground, Bolaños is going to be in a lot of trouble. But on the feet, like, I know Cortavius has decent kicks to the head, decent kicks to the body, but he's pretty much outmatched in terms of the striking in this fight. And every fight starts on the feet. Bolaños switches stances, he moves well, throws good combinations, can throw elbows on the inside, good knees. Very, very solid Muay Thai, like overall kickboxing. And he's the much better striker compared to Cortavius. Now, I think Bolaños has better defensive responsibility, and that's really what it comes down to. Cortavius throws big, wild shots, and they have a lot of power, but he leaves himself open for big counters. Just go back and watch the fight against Ramon Taveras, where he came out, tried to get into a firefight, and the minute he got clipped with one shot and dropped, he got clipped and dropped again, and then got clipped and knocked out, all within a span of like 30 or 45 seconds. Now, the second time he got on the Contender Series, he took on Michael Imperatu, and that was a fight where Cortavius was a huge favorite, and I do not think he lived up to the huge price tag. Whenever he got into those big, wild exchanges, he ended up getting tagged. He left his chin in the air. He threw wild looping punches. His head kicks and his body kicks looked good. He does have solid kicks, but the main way he won that fight was just pressure and tenacity with his wrestling. So it really comes down to the fact of, can he take down Bolaños? Can he lock up a submission? I definitely believe Romeus wins by submission 9 out of 10 times. If he wins this fight, he's going to win by submission. I don't think he wins by knockout. I know Marcus McGee knocked out Bolaños, but I like Marcus McGee a lot. And I think McGee's going to do some great things in this division. But on the feet, I think Bolaños is cleaner. He's going to find those openings with the looping punches of Cortavius. He's going to clip the chin of Cortavius a bunch of times. It comes down to his takedown defense. What is the takedown defense of Bolaños going to look like? From what we've seen so far, he has pretty good takedown defense, but he's not great once he gets taken down to the ground. He's got a 50% takedown defense, but a lot of times fighters are going to stand up and try to throw with their opponents. And I think that's what this fight comes down to. Does Cortavius throw enough punches to get Bolaños to back up and take him down? Because if he takes him down, he probably gets an arm triangle. He probably gets an arm bar. He probably takes his back and gets a rear naked choke. He is the much better grappler in this fight. But if he can't get the takedowns, I think he gets knocked out by Bolaños. Bolaños is a lot cleaner. He throws better combinations. He has better feints. And I think he has more power than Romeus as well. I know people are going to look at that fight with Marcus McGee and be like, oh, he got knocked out by this guy, this and that. But Marcus McGee is a tough guy, man. He's a maniac, and not just by the nickname. He lives up to that moniker 100%. So, again, I've said this a bunch of times, but it's true. How do you see this fight playing out? Do you see the forward pressure and wrestling of Cortavius working, or do you see the striking of Bolaños working and seeing Bolaños get a KO? I'm going with Bolaños. I'm going to go Gaston Bolaños by second round knockout. I think he's going to be able to stuff the takedowns of Romeus. I think he knows that that's what Romeus is going to come into this fight looking to do. I think he might get clipped with some decent shots, but at the same time, I think Romeus is going to have his takedown stuffed and be forced to strike with Bolaños. And I think Bolaños lands on the chin of Romeus with his wide looping punches and the fact that he basically has no head movement. So I think Bolaños lands a big shot, starts putting his combinations together, hurts Romeus and doesn't allow him to recover, stops the panic shot, and then beats him up. Give me Gaston, the Dream Killer Bolaños, via second round knockout in this fight. If you're on the side of Romeus, you just take Romeus by submission, because I think that's how he wins. Probably takes the back of Bolaños and gets a sub, probably locks up an arm triangle, something like that. If you're on the side of Romeus, you just play Romeus by sub. I think Bolaños wins by second round KO. But again, another close fight, kind of 50-50 striker versus grappler. But give me the more seasoned kickboxer in Bolaños here. Up next is a fight in the bantamweight division between Cody Staman taking on Damon Blackshear. This is a close fight too, man. A lot of really close fights on this card. Not the best card for betting if you're looking at betting picks, but you know, Staman is a good fighter. He doesn't have the best record in the UFC, but he's not a guy that's easy to finish. Excuse me, unless you go for your jiu-jitsu. You stay on the feet with this guy, he's going to be able to compete with you. We saw him get outclassed and outpointed by Taylor Lapilus. Was able to stop the takedown, stop the pressure, and just kind of outpoint him over 15 minutes. But we know that's what to expect when you look at a guy like Lapilus. And that's not what you're going to get from Blackshear. You have Blackshear coming back off that first round one-punch knockout loss to Montel Jackson. And I mean, look at last night, Dustin Stoltzfus and Marc-Andre Barriault. We knew that in the clinch is where Barriault needed to be, but we knew he was coming back off that vicious first round KO. He traded, left his chin in the air, and got knocked out by Stoltzfus, who's a guy that, I mean, he is a kickboxer, or he was a kickboxer, but at the same time, this guy's a grappler at heart and should have never been able to knock out a guy like Marc-Andre. But coming off that KO loss, you never know how their chin is going to look. Staman is going to be able to compete with Blackshear on the feet. Blackshear has good striking. He's a good athlete. He moves well, goes in with 1-2s. And I kind of feel like the wrestling between the two cancels each other out. So I think we're going to get a mainly striking matchup. And what do you expect from Blackshear coming in? Are you sitting here saying, well, he got KO'd in the first round with one punch. It was a vicious KO. He's not going to come back the same fighter, and Staman has decent power. He does have okay power. He throws crisp and clean punches. Good 1-2s, switches stances, orthodox and southpaw, can switch stance mid-combination. He has a beautiful left hook, which could be a problem for a guy like Blackshear. But at the same time, I kind of see wrestling canceling out here, and I think this probably plays out more times than not than an actually like a point fighting match. And I think Blackshear has the better jiu-jitsu. I think Blackshear has the better control on the mat. But I feel like the better striker might be Cody Staman. He might be able to put some volume together, might be able to put some combinations together. And I worry a little bit about the chin of Blackshear. But I also feel like Staman does have power, but he doesn't have the most power. If Staman gets a knockout here, it's probably with the left hook that he was able to use to rock Douglas Silva de Andrade. He can push a higher pace, push a high pace in the third round. Blackshear pushes a high pace, has good takedowns, one of the only fighters outside of the Korean Zombie to get a twister submission inside the UFC, so we know his grappling is legit. He's got really solid wrestling, really good chaining of takedown attempts together. We'll switch from one attempt to another, to another, to another. But Staman has good defense, and even if you take him down, he's got good ability to work his way back up to the feet. I think this fight plays out as a 15-minute kickboxing match. I think the fight's very close. I think Blackshear lands some good combinations, probably lands some front kicks to the body. I think Staman lands some stance-switching combinations, probably lands that left hook a few times as well. And I think this comes down again to a 50-50 fight. I think the fight ends by split decision. I'm going to go with Damon Blackshear. I'm going to go with the monster. Give me Damon Blackshear via 29-28 split decision. I could easily see them giving the decision to Staman because I do think Staman is the cleaner striker, but he doesn't have the greatest volume, so I'm not 100% sure that he might not get outworked in this fight by Blackshear, who I think can push a higher pace. So give me Damon Blackshear 29-28 split decision. I could see Blackshear locking up a sub. I could see Staman landing a left hook and getting a KO, but I think we go to decision. And I think it's a good fight. I think it's close, but give me Damon Blackshear 29-28 split decision. All right, up next is a battle in the welterweight division between Matthew Semi, the Jedi Semelsberger, taking on Charles Radke. Chuck Buffalo versus Semi, the Jedi. I think this comes down to, is Radke going to use his wrestling and grappling? We know that Semelsberger has a big hole in his grappling, but we know that on the feet, this guy's always live for a knockout. The 1-2 down the middle, the right hand, the right hand of Semelsberger is pretty much what's made his entire career in mixed martial arts. He doesn't have a ton of other punches. He doesn't throw a bunch of power into his left hook. He doesn't have like a vicious right uppercut. It's the straight right hand down the middle. Being orthodox versus orthodox, I think that right hand's probably going to be there. And if he lands on the chin of Radke, he can knock him out. Radke's been KO'd before. But we've seen Radke does have decent wrestling. He does have good jiu-jitsu. We know that he can use his takedowns and his grappling to get fights where he needs them to be. And I feel like he is the much better and more seasoned grappler than Matthew Semelsberger in this fight. I mean, if you look overall at the grappling stats here, he only has a 45% takedown defense rate, does Semelsberger, but Radke doesn't really look to shoot takedowns. He likes to stand and strike with his opponents. You saw him knock out Gilbert Urbina with a vicious left hook. I even picked Radke to win against Carlos Prates, and that's a pick that I go look back on, and I'm like, I know the reasons why I picked him, but that was a bad pick looking at how the fight played out. I think that Semelsberger doesn't have near the variety of a guy like Carlos Prates, but I do believe that he's dangerous enough to find the opportunity to land that straight right down the middle, to land a 1-2 on the chin of Radke, who, like I said, has been knocked out before, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that Semelsberger can be losing the entire fight on points. He can be getting taken down. He can be getting controlled on the ground, but he might just land that right hand and knock Radke out. But more times than not, I think we're going to see the forward pressure, the clean left hook of Radke, and the grappling really win him this fight against Semelsberger. I think Semelsberger's live for a knockout. I think fight ends by knockout might be a good path of victory to bet on. But I'm going to go with the grappling and top pressure and submissions of Charles Radke to win him this fight. We saw him use it against Blood Diamond, who's known primarily as a solid striker, and he was able to get on the inside and get those takedowns. Semelsberger doesn't have great takedown defense. I'm kind of surprised it hasn't gotten much, much better, because he knows that most of the time, unless you're a seasoned kickboxer, you're not going to want to stand with this guy, because you know that you can get knocked out with that right hand. You know he's going to be looking to land that 1-2 down the middle. And if he lands on the chin of Chuck Buffalo, he might be sleeping with the fishes after one right hand. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with the better grappler to use his grappling. We saw Semelsberger defend multiple submissions against a high-level jiu-jitsu grappler in Preston Parsons. Parsons won that fight via decision, used his grappling, kind of outstruck Semelsberger as well, just out-volumed him, landed better shots, and took him down, controlled him, went for multiple submissions, but didn't get it. I'm going to go Charles Radke by submission. I'm going to go a second-round arm triangle choke submission. I think Radke probably finds a sub. Maybe he lands ground and pound from the mount or flattens him out after he takes his back. But I think Radke knows that he should probably use his grappling, and I think we're going to see him use that in this fight against Semelsberger. He might get clipped on the way in, but I think he's going to use his wrestling, take him down, land ground and pound, look for subs, go back to the ground and pound, look for subs, go back to the ground and pound. And I think Radke's going to get this done with a second-round arm triangle choke submission. Give me Charles Radke to get the victory here by sub. All right, up next is a battle in the middleweight division between Mansour Abdul Malik taking on Dusko Todorovic. This is a tee-up spot for Mansour Abdul Malik, and there's really not much else to say about it. They used Dusko Todorovic to get these guys wins, and the last time I bet Todorovic was against Jordan Wright, because I knew he wasn't going to be able to do much against a pressure fighter and a striker like Dusko. However, Mansour's forward pressure, his wrestling, his top control, his ground and pound, I think he's going to run through Dusko Todorovic. I don't think Dusko Todorovic is a bad MMA fighter, but I don't think he's UFC level or UFC caliber at this point. And I think the UFC knows exactly what they're doing here, man. I think Mansour's going to walk forward. I think he's going to hit Todorovic with a big shot. I think he's going to get in on the hips, lift him up, take him down, get into the top position, get in half guard, land some elbows, land some hammer fists, land some knees up the middle. Or not knees up the middle, land some elbows, land some hammer fists, keep the pressure on top, transition into mount, and just unload with ground and pound. I'm going to go Mansour Abdul Malik or Mansour Abdul Malik via a first-round TKO victory. Could be a submission. I think it's just inside the distance. Mansour round 1, round 2. I think he takes him down, beats him up, and gets a ground and pound victory from the mount. So give me Mansour Abdul Malik by first round ground and pound TKO. Like I said, I think the UFC knows what they're doing. And Dusko could catch him on the feet. He doesn't have bad striking. He's got good forward pressure. Dusko's really good in the clinch. But I don't really think it's going to matter. I think once Abdul Malik gets a hold of Todorovic, he's taking him down and he's beating him up. So give me Mansour Abdul Malik, first round ground and pound TKO. All right, next up is in the welterweight division, and it's a rematch from back in, I believe, 2015 between Eliseu Zaleski dos Santos taking on Nicholas Dolby. I think that this comes down to, can Zaleski dos Santos land the big shots that hurt Nicholas Dolby, or is Dolby just going to outwork him, move forward, out-pressure him, land the higher volume of strikes and slow down a guy who I think is aging, at least in his MMA career, in Eliseu Zaleski dos Santos. I picked dos Santos to find a finish against Randy Brown. He hurt Rinat Fakhretdinov to the body, almost TKO'd him, ended up losing that fight or having that fight be a draw because he got taken down and got out-pressured. Dolby is not the most powerful striker. Dolby is not a guy who's going to knock you out with crazy power or whatever, but I think when it gets to the midpoint of the second round, when it gets to the third round, this is my golden rule when I break down fights, like who is going to win down the stretch, because a lot of these fights aren't ending super early. If the fight ends early, I think it's dos Santos landing a vicious capoeira kick to the head of Dolby or landing a big overhand and knocking him out. But I don't think he's going to knock Dolby out, and I don't think he's going to be able to out-wrestle Dolby. I don't think he's going to have the higher volume. I don't think he's going to have the better cardio and push a higher pace in the midpoint of the second and onward. If anything, I think Dolby could get a TKO late round 2, round 3. But I'm going to say Dolby wins this fight by decision. Maybe a third round finish. I think Dolby round 3 is a solid bet. You'll probably get plus 2,000 odds or something like that. But I'm going to go Nicholas Dolby. I'm actually going to go with a finish. Give me Nicholas Dolby, round 3 TKO. I think he just outworks dos Santos, lands the higher volume, gets hit with some power shots, but keeps on moving and keeps moving forward, throwing those weird kicks and moving in and out with that karate stance, and just eventually overwhelms dos Santos with the pace and pressure. So give me Nicholas Dolby to defeat Eliseu Zaleski dos Santos via third round TKO in this fight. All right, up next is a fight I'm actually pretty interested in and excited to break down. You have Gerald GM3 Mearshart coming off that come from behind, typical GM3 submission victory over Edmund Shabazian, taking on the UFC debutant, former two-weight one championship fighter in the Dutch Knight, Reinier de Ritter. Reinier de Ritter versus GM3 is a grappler's delight. Both of these guys are extremely proficient on the ground. I would say the better wrestler in layman's terms is de Ritter. I think de Ritter has better takedowns. He's better from the body lock. He's better with inside and outside trips. He pushes the wrestling better, but sometimes he puts his neck into bad positions. And that's not something you want to do against a guy like GM3. I think on the feet, Mearshart is the better striker. Like just breaking down tape, I don't think Mearshart's a good striker, but I think de Ritter is a pretty terrible striker. And that's crazy saying that about a guy who's 17-2, but I do think that he has the better wrestling, and I think he can avoid a lot of the submission attempts of Mearshart down the stretch. And we know that when we look at a guy like Mearshart, it's always submission or bust, but that's just the way that he fights. You know he's going to get teed up on the feet. You know more than likely he's going to find a way to win. He's going to find a way to take the back of the opponent. He's going to find a way to win a scramble. He's going to throw up a triangle off of his back. He's going to go for a guillotine. He's going to hurt an opponent to the body, take their back, and lock up a rear naked choke. He's a very opportunistic jiu-jitsu fighter. Probably one of the best opportunistic grapplers that have ever competed in MMA. But watching some tape on de Ritter, I think he's got better wrestling. I think he's got better positional awareness on the ground. I do think he's at a disadvantage on the feet. I don't like his striking. He doesn't really throw strikes that crisp or clean. And even though GM3 isn't the best in terms of actual good striking, he probably throws better technical punches than de Ritter. And that's not the greatest thing to think about if you're on the side of a guy like Reinier de Ritter in his UFC debut. But I do like the forward pressure. I do like the takedowns. I love the ground and pound. I think he's got much better ground and pound than GM3, and I think that's really what's going to make the difference here. Because I think more often than not, you're going to get the Ritter ending up on the top. If he's on the bottom, I think he's going to be a little bit more active or equally active to a GM3, throwing up reverse triangles from his back, throwing up arm bars, throwing up regular triangles, looking for sweeps, looking to attack the neck. The guy is very active off of his back, and when he's on top, he transitions to side control. He goes from the half guard to the full mount and lands ground and pound, good elbows, good hammer fists, can lock up an arm triangle. He's very positionally aware, and he gets the knees up to the armpits when he goes for the mount. And I honestly think he's a better wrestler than GM3. I think if this fight stays on the feet, like we said, I do think GM3 has a chance to hurt De Ritter and then potentially win with a submission after he rocks him. But I'm going to go with the UFC newcomer. I'm going to go with De Ritter, and I'm going to go with De Ritter by submission. I think Reiner De Ritter is going to be the better positional grappler. I think he's going to win more positions on the mat than GM3. And GM3 is a great grappler. Most of his wins do come by submission. If you look at his record, he's 37-17 with 29 of the wins coming by way of submission. But you have 8 of his losses coming by submission. He's been submitted more than he's been knocked out. And that's something that I think a lot of people tend to glaze over when they look at GM3. They're like, oh my God, his grappling is so good. His top pressure is so good. I'm surprised that, anybody would be able to grapple with him, but he's lost the most times by submission. He's been KO'd before as well, but I think De Ritter is going to outwork GM3 positionally. And I think he's going to get a submission. I'm going to go with an arm triangle choke submission in round 2 for the UFC newcomer in the Dutch Knight, Reiner De Ritter. I don't necessarily think this guy's going to have the best UFC career. Just I don't like what I've seen from him on the feet. And if the guy has good takedown defense, you're basically in a really bad spot if you're De Ritter. But he is 17-2. Both of his losses actually come to the same guy, and both of his losses have come by knockout. So I think GM3 is viable to land a big shot on the feet and hurt De Ritter. But when I really break it down, I think De Ritter wins based off better positional grappling, better awareness, better wrestling than GM3, and winding up in the top position and landing big ground and pound from mount and locking up a sub. I'm going to go a second round arm triangle choke submission for the Dutch Knight in Reiner De Ritter in his UFC debut. Like I said, I don't know how successful he's going to be overall in the UFC, but I like this guy, and I think he's going to submit GM3. Crazy, I know, but it's happened before. Reiner De Ritter via second round arm triangle choke submission. All right, up next is a fight that we actually don't have any odds for in the bantamweight division between Ricky Turcios taking on Bernardo Soai. I'm going to be honest, guys. This breakdown's not going to be long because I think Bernardo is better in every aspect of MMA besides cardio. He's got really solid striking, good stance changes, really good kicks to the body, throws up kicks to the head, has good 1-2s down the middle. He throws solid striking combinations, has good wrestling in his own right, good top control, good top pressure, will look to take your back, will look to get a submission, and Turcios is decent. He throws decent combinations. He's a lot of volume, but not the best technique. He kind of just tries to overwhelm you with weird and awkward combinations, but doesn't tend to have the best understanding of his distance in terms of the striking in MMA. He tends to throw shots out of range or make a lot of sounds when he's throwing the shots to make the judges think he's landing when he's really not landing much. He almost submitted Raul Rosas Jr., and Rosas is a great grappler. I think Rosas Jr. Has some of the best jiu-jitsu in MMA, even though he's so young, but he's able to find a way to take the back of Raul Rosas and almost get a rear naked choke, but somehow he was able to survive with that crimson chin and then finally find a way to take the back of Turcios and lock up a rear naked choke by sinking it under the chin. Turcios can grapple with the best of them. Turcios is a good chain wrestler, a good chain grappler, and if he can push Bernardo to the midpoint of the second round and into the third round, we already saw him slow down when he was basically a 10 or 11-1 favorite on the live odds against Vinicius Oliveira. But if you're able to take down, control, outstrike Oliveira, get the takedowns, control him, look for rear naked chokes, and positionally outwork him, I think you have a good chance to win this fight against Turcios, man. I picked Soai as an underdog against Oliveira, and it looked like it was going our way until it wasn't. And it was in the end of the third round, basically, and he finally caught him with that flying knee, and that was it. You know, he lost, but he probably would have won on the scorecards 2-1 if they made it to the decision, but that's just not what happened. But I think Bernardo is way better on the feet. He has much better power. He's way better technically. He's better defensively. He has good wrestling. He has good jiu-jitsu. He's positionally aware. I think he's going to be able to conserve his gas tank at a higher clip in this fight than his last fight. I think he learned from his last performance. And I think Soai is going to win, man. I think Soai is going to TKO Ricky Turcios. Maybe he gets a submission, but I think he gets a ground and pound TKO against Turcios. I'm going to go with a second round ground and pound TKO for Bernardo Soai. I like this kid. I think he's well-rounded. I think he's very aware of what he needs to do inside the cage. He can compete. He's much better on the feet, much more dangerous on the feet than Turcios. And he has the wrestling and top pressure and top control paired with good jiu-jitsu to be able to scramble with a guy like Turcios. If you're on Turcios, you probably want to bet Turcios wins in round 3. If you think that the cardio issues are going to rear their head again in this fight, just like they did against Oliveira. But I think this is a spot where Soai looks very good. And I think he finishes Turcios, who I'm honestly not very high on. So give me Bernardo Soai, second round ground and pound TKO over Ricky Turcios. Like I said, if you're on Turcios, you probably bet Turcios to win in round 3. But I don't think he's going to make it that far. So give me Bernardo Soai, second round ground and pound TKO. And in the co-main event of the evening in the bantamweight division, you have Cody No Love Garbrandt coming back off that submission loss to Davison Figueiredo, taking on Miles Choppa Johns. 15-2 for Miles Johns, 14-6 for Cody No Love Garbrandt. I think this fight, again, just like a lot of fights on this card, is kind of 50-50. Because I think the faster fighter is Cody Garbrandt. I think the fighter with better footwork is Garbrandt. I think the fighter with faster hands is Garbrandt. The fighter with more volume is Garbrandt. But Miles Johns is kind of just forward pressure, measuring, and a big overhand right or a big right hand. And I don't trust the chin of Cody Garbrandt. I really don't. I could see Miles Johns knocking out Garbrandt. I could see Garbrandt winning a volume-based decision where he's just quicker to the trigger and landing better strikes and landing multi-shot combinations and getting out of the way of the big shots of Miles Johns. And I could see Miles Johns winning based off pressure later in the fight. Kind of like what we saw with Trevin Jones and Garbrandt. He pushed him back, pressured forward, tired him out, and landed big shots. And I think Miles Johns has enough power to knock out a guy like Cody Garbrandt at this point in his career. I think Garbrandt's the better overall fighter. I think he's the better, more well-rounded fighter at this point. But I mean, just being realistic, I don't know who's going to win this fight. You know, I think Miles Johns is probably the smarter pick because he probably has more left in the tank and he has big power that can hurt Garbrandt, whose chin we've seen get cracked multiple times and who we've seen slow down later in fights. But I also think Garbrandt has faster combinations. I think Miles Johns has been knocked out before. I think he has enough power to hurt Miles Johns. I think he's going to throw better combinations. I think he's going to move better. I think he has the better wrestling and the better defensive grappling as well. It really comes down to, can Garbrandt outwork him for 15 minutes without getting knocked out? Or can he knock out Miles Johns? I'm going to take Garbrandt. I'm not super confident in this pick. I don't think it's a pick where I'm like, oh my God, Garbrandt's going to win this going away. Because you always got to worry about the equalizer, which is the glass chin of Cody Garbrandt. And I'm not hating Garbrandt. I love Garbrandt. You know, he's one of my favorite fighters. He's always been one of my favorites. But I've seen him get knocked out so many times, you know, you sour on him a little bit and you start to see the holes in his game. I think Garbrandt outstrikes Miles Johns. I think he outlands him. I think he can out-wrestle him. And I think he wins a decision. And I think he has the opportunity to knock out Miles Johns because Johns just doesn't have volume. If Johns threw multi-shot combinations, I would pick Miles Johns, but he doesn't. So I got to go Garbrandt. Give me the underdog. Give me Cody. No Love Garbrandt. 29-28 unanimous decision. Maybe a knockout as well, but I'm going to go decision. Give me Garbrandt winning 2 out of the 3 rounds. Outlanding, out-voluming, and just outpacing Miles Johns over 15 minutes. So Cody No Love Garbrandt. to win via 29-28 unanimous decision over Miles Choppa Johns. But Johns is definitely live for a KO. And now we are at the main event of the evening in the welterweight division between the stablemate of the 170-pound division in Neil Magny, UFC veteran, taking on a fighter coming out of one of the hottest gyms in the world at the moment. One of the most talked about camps with mega amounts of success in the fighting nerds in the Nightmare, Carlos Prates. Let's be real, guys. I think a lot of people will look at Magny's fight against Mike Malott and think that he can do a similar thing to Carlos Prates. Think that he can slow him down. Think that he can get him in the clinch. Think that he can push him into those championship rounds. Because this is going to be the first 5-round fight for Prates in the UFC. First main event for Prates in the UFC. And do I think that Magny's probably the better grappler? Yes. But do I think Prates is working on his grappling? Yeah, 100%. I think that he is a very well-rounded fighter. It's just a fighter who we haven't had the chance to see those other wrinkles of his game because he doesn't really need it. You know, Prates stays on the feet. He cuts angles extremely well. He uses his reach, probably uses his reach the best out of a lot of people inside the UFC. Cutting angles, getting that outside angle against the opposite stance, throwing kicks to the body. He can fake the kick to the body and come up with a knee. He can throw a knee to the head like he's turning his hip over for a kick to the body. And he's got a really solid 1-2, good check hook. He can use the check hook to avoid the power shots of his opponent. And I really think the only person that's going to be able to give Prates a lot of trouble are guys with heavy pressure, a lot of power, and a heavy wrestling game. And Magny has some of those things. You know, he has decent wrestling. He can push Prates up against the cage, you know, work in the clinch with elbows. Knees to the body, knees to the thigh, uppercuts in the dirty boxing range, change levels, get the takedowns, look for submissions. I think if the fight's on the floor and Prates is on his back, then Magny's probably going to be winning this fight because I do not think that that's a good spot for Prates. He doesn't want to be on his back with Magny on top. But we don't know if Prates has good submissions. I believe he's been submitted in his MMA career before. Let me look this up really quick. Let's see. Carlos the Nightmare Prates. He has 6 losses, and 3 of them are by submission. He got submitted back in PFC Premier Fighting Championship in 2013 via triangle choke in the first round. Got submitted with a heel hook in the first round. A rear naked choke in the first round. That was early in his career, and then he's just rattled off win after win after win. I do believe that Magny is live to take down Prates later in the fight. Probably round 3, 4, 5. Prates, if he's still there, if he's getting tired, if he's getting backed up, then I do believe that Magny can impose his grappling, impose his wrestling, get to the top position, probably get to mount, land, ground and pound, and look to get a submission. Probably a rear naked choke, if I had to guess. But I do not think that Magny's going to survive for that long. And I also think that fighting a fighter who has a similar reach to you when you're so used to having the height and reach advantage against your opponent is going to be a big issue. And I think that that's another issue for Magny. You know, Magny got steamrolled by Michael Morales. We were pretty heavy on Morales there. And I'm the same way with Prates here, man. I think Prates is too crisp, too clean, and he's going to have a very similar reach to Magny, who, like we already said, is used to being able to use his length and reach to kind of keep the distance and pick apart his opponent at range and then close the distance when he wants to. I don't think that's a good idea. Even though Prates gets hit a lot, Magny doesn't really have knockout power unless it's ground and pound and just slowing him down, breaking him cardio-wise, kind of like a Mike Malott. And I don't think that's going to happen here. I think Prates is a well-rounded guy. I think Prates knows that Magny's going to look for that forward pressure and the takedowns, and I think he's going to defend it. And I think Prates' Muay Thai is some of the best striking in this division. And I think he's going to put it on display, and I think he's going to knock Neil Magny out. I could see a very similar situation to the Santiago Ponzinibbio fight where he was able to land that jab to the body and a right hand, Neil Magny, and knock him out, kind of face planting him. I don't know if the knockout would be that exact sequence, but we saw what he did to the Leech and Li Jingliang, who had never been knocked out before. and he basically put a clinic on him and hurt him multiple times and then knocked him out with that beautiful left hook to like a sweeping right hook or uppercut hybrid and just put him down, face down. That's a big win, man, because Leach is a durable guy. Even though he's been in the UFC for a long time, nobody's ever done that to the Leach except Chimaev, and that was more grappling base than striking. I think Prates is the real deal. I've said this for a few fights now. And I did pick Prates to win by knockout against the Leach. I think if I didn't, you can correct me. But I do think he's going to put Neil Magny away. I'm going to go with Carlos the Nightmare Prates to win this fight via a second round TKO. Probably second or third round, but I'll go second round. Second round TKO against Neil Magny. I think Prates is on the up and up. Magny is on the decline. If you're going to play Magny, you play late props. Magny round 3, Magny round 4. Magny sub 3, Magny sub 4, but I don't think he's going to be able to get past a guy like Prates. I think Prates is too technical, too crisp, has the length and reach to compete with Magny, and has a big power advantage. So I'm taking the Nightmare in his first UFC main event. Give me Carlos Prates via a third, or let me go second round because that's what I originally said, via a second round knockout.